Chris, welcome to Shared Prosperity, which is, and really it's an extension of the work that started when I met you at the Path to Shared Prosperity that was put on by ResourceWorks, when they wanted to take a look at what was the impact initially, but how do we start to understand what the implications of the BC legislature's adoption of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. You were there to try and figure that out. Have you had a chance to start to give this some thought and say, here's what it means as we move forward?
First, thank you for hosting me. I really appreciate being here, and thank you for considering me to speak with you.
And we should also acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam First Nations territory here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have. As you know, in our earlier discussions, I was conflicted and trying to understand. For me, it was so much, what does the process look like?
Yes.
That's the biggest part for me. And then I began to speak with other leaders that are well down the highway, if I may, really doing 80 to 90% of this stuff. Our community was one of them. But I had a really good discussion with a very influential leader who I highly respect, that I get a lot of advice from. And he was able to get me to understand that UNDRIP may not work effectively just for one First Nation or a group of First Nations, that it may be different for others of how they get to free, prior, and informed consent. Mm-hmm. So what one nation does here doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do the same thing over here to get to the whole word of consent that we say yes to a project.
Well, that's because no matter what project you're involved in or whatever negotiation is, those negotiations are particular to the circumstances of that
community.
That community.
Yes, mm-hmm. and I think it's the worry that I had was that I didn't want the narrative of UNDRIP burying all the good work that their communities like Haisla, like Metlakatla, like Lachuams, and all these other communities like Osoyoos, and just right across this good country, mm-hmm. all the progressive First Nation communities that are out there that are implement a lot of UNDRIP. So for me now, now that I guess the dust is settled a bit, mm-hmm. I'm getting to see a clearer picture. I do still have my reservations still. About
why? What are those reservations? What are you concerned about?
I think one is I really hope that this doesn't give First Nations people a false sense of hope.
Okay. I think that's a legitimate concern.
And it's not. I was not against UNDRIP. I'm against what its purpose is, because if you say it doesn't change laws, it doesn't change policy. Section 35's rights and titles still supersedes case law. There's all those examples out there.
So then what does it mean?
So what does it mean? So are we in a position now where can we really go forge ahead and really bring this country together, understanding our values, our traditions, our culture, that every Canadian is going to buy in? Mm-hmm. Or are we going to go the route where, well, wait a second, is it really going to change the system? Yeah. So my concern has always been that why we've adopted this piece of legislation, which I believe is a good thing.
So it's my understanding, and I think this is part of the confusion, because it took me a while to start to get it. Okay, what exactly does this mean? And I think it means that we've adopted this as a framework. That's the way that I hear it. It's been adopted by the legislature as a framework that will guide the creation and the rewriting of laws, but it doesn't automatically come along and rewrite everything.
No, and it's going to take time.
Yes.
It's going to take between 10 and 15 years till you fully implement UNDRIP. So, I mean, there's all those examples of case law out there, right? So, but this particular piece of legislation It does have me concerned about how we're going to do this. However, as I keep going back to my conversations, like I said, with some very good leaders out there, they believe UNDRIP is opening other parts of other doors that weren't necessarily opening as quick as they would have liked to. And so I try to take that advice on both sides. I really want to have a balanced discussion about it. I want to have an open mind about it to make sure that, okay, as a people of this country, Indigenous people of this country, that we are going to, all Canadians are going to fully buy into this. Now, not necessarily always agree, but if we could get to a common ground and understanding, I think for the most part, Indigenous people, they just want to be heard.
And rightly so.
Yeah, and they want to be a part of the process to help their communities get out of poverty, all the challenges that come with poverty. Poverty is what's the issue. There's a lot of smart Indigenous people out there. There's significance of people that are out there that are doing wonderful things. And I just want us to continue moving forward with this. And again, I think it's so early for everybody to try and understand its entirety. But for me, it's just, I really hope this Canadian government really does live up to what they say they want to stand by, of really working with Indigenous people.
I hope you're right.
I do. And I speak to a lot of people, Stuart. I speak to a lot of Indigenous people. A lot of them are my friends. Some of them are on the other side. And I don't like really using that word, but when you talk about whether you're in favor or undecided or opposed, there is still that common denominator of uncertainty for those that are opposed, because is this project going to threaten our way of life? We believe it will. That's what they're saying. So I'm starting to reach out to communities and have this dialogue. And one of the things I always try to make clear when I'm speaking with them is that I will always tell you the truth. I will never, ever tell somebody what they want to hear. I'm a pro-development Indigenous person of this country. I believe in the resource sector. I believe that the jobs that could come with it, the revenue streams could really help us get out of those challenging social problems we currently experience today. And then there's those that are opposed, that say, look, I'm worried for the future of my children's children. Our language, our arts, our culture, our way of life is being threatened by big development. And
those are legitimate
those
concerns.
are very legitimate concerns.
So one of the things that I noted, like I have been to a variety of different communities that are, let's say, along the line of the Coastal Gas Link. And I talk to different Indigenous leaders and I go, okay, why are you in favor of this? Well, number one, it brings money in. So what are you going to do with that money? Well, we're going to put it into cultural education programs for our youth. And the number one reason for wanting to do that is I want you to be proud of who you are so that you don't lose your heritage and your ancestry, that you use that, you celebrate it, and you build upon it as a strength. Yeah. We haven't had that history of celebrating Indigenous culture yet. But let's build on that.
Yeah, we're moving in that direction, right? And that's the whole purpose. Getting back to my point, when I was speaking to some friends and people that I know that were opposing development, after the conversation, there was a common denominator there. There was more in common than not in these conversations. The willingness to have the ability to include each other, the willingness to have a collaboration, even if you disagree, the willingness to understand what are the best needs of each individual community. And then you take those principles and you put them in the middle and you combine the two of what makes sense. Are we there yet? No, not yet, but we are moving in that direction.
Right.
I think there are more and more communities now that UNDRIP is being adopted. I think they have now. There's a sense of pride that the government, listen to us. This is what we've been trying to tell you for years, to understand our laws. So I hear a lot of people talking about Canadian law and then Indigenous law. And that's what a lot of the fight is right now. And I've been paying attention to TMX, paying attention to Coastal GasLink, and trying to really understand the people like Swellowtooth and the groups that are very upset right now with the recent ruling of TMX, and trying to really grasp what they're trying to get at? What is their ask, I guess, is ultimately what it is.
Well, that's a good question.
Is what is their ask, right? So I'm still myself trying to understand it. No doubtedly,
Yeah.
they want to protect their waters. They want to protect their way of life. I get all that.
Right.
But yet, to date, I've still not really heard what the ask is.
Right.
And
And it's unreasonable for us to speculate with that.
Yeah.
Because we're not
not
members of
them.
that community. Yeah.
yeah, I knew what our ask was.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't want to be that individual going in there and saying I know what they want. Well, I don't know
you
what they
don't know.
want.
Yeah.
Nor should I even speak for a nation or any particular community that's
Rightly
going
so.
through these difficult times. I feel for the people of the Wet'suwet'en, of what's happening up there. I really, really hope they could come to some resolve.
Yes.
I don't want to see any escalated violence.
Most certainly not.
I think people want to keep this as peaceful as possible. I really believe that. I think, but again, even with that particular project, I have not heard what the ask is. While I was on council, I had a chance to really not fully finish the book, but I got to read Dalgamut.
Yes.
On what that meant for the people there. And
Yes.
one thing I got out of reading that was that they were 100% together.
Yes.
And they were able to establish that, we did not surrender our territory and our
Right.
rights.
Well, that was a landmark case.
That was a
Gitche and
very-
Wet'suwet'en
Yeah.
came together in ultimately what became
Was it
Dalgamut.
incredible?
Yeah, and it was that coming together.
Yeah, it was an incredible case. And
Yeah.
so now I see what's happening now, and I still wonder how is this going to play out if the nations aren't together up there. It's no different than any other nation. We all have our challenges, and it's not an easy thing to take on. It's a very complex world.
Yes, it is.
And if you don't know what you're walking into, you could walk into a lot of landmines. So you need to understand, and patience is a virtue, right? And I know, and I'm not a patient person by nature, but I'm learning to understand and have more appreciation for patience because our ancestors were very, very patient, significantly.
Okay, so let's move on to the concept of creating prosperity, because really this is where you're at. You have said, I have embraced development. I've embraced the idea of economic activity that can benefit people by giving them employment and the resources they need to realize their potential. You are, on your own and as a group, a growing concern. Tell me about your company and what is it that you're doing.
Yeah, so Blackfish Enterprises, one department of it, I actually give strategic advice on bridging the gap between indigenous and the industry.
Yep.
I keep an open dialogue with government and provide advice and just proper dialogue and open to understanding both sides of the conversation and finding a path forward so we could reach an opportunity to get to informed consent. So that's one part I do. One of the other companies I have is Blackfish Industries. I have a heavy civil. It's relatively new, but we're growing at a nice pace.
What kind of work are you doing?
It's heavy civil.
Yep.
And we're, like I said, we're a very small company right now, but we believe we could get to a size that could really make a real impact.
Well, there's more and more work coming into the area that's going to require those kinds of services. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I have, as you know, Big Crude Energy. I'm a partner in that. And
and that's a fascinating business with what you're doing with bitumen. Tell us about that.
Yes.
Because what you're doing is you're saying, I want to protect the environment, I want to protect economic opportunity, I want to be able to pull these things together in a way that everybody benefits from, and we still get to enjoy the benefits of a modern society.
Yeah, look, we found a way to move solid bitumen without diluent. We could move it in. Think of a block of margarine butter in a fridge. It's a semi-solid. You take it out, you put it in a microwave, you get to a certain temperature. It comes out as a liquid. You put it on your counter and you let it solidify. It becomes back a semi-solid. So it's electrical. It's an electrical process that the chairman of the company has been able to develop.
So you take bitumen and you, in essence, consolidate it as a solid. Like
Yes.
it's a tar to begin with, but you make it into a solid block.
Well, it naturally solidifies.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're able to. There's two processes. One we could electrify it, and we could melt it down like a milk, and then we could transfer that into another sea can. The other one is separating the diluent from the bitumen. So the diluent is, of course, flammable. The bitumen is not.
Right. And so that when you transport it,
It's transported as a solid. Yeah.
which changes the dynamics of everything, doesn't it?
It does. We're really new.
Yes.
As you know, everybody's well aware we haven't come out of the gates yet. There's still a lot of work behind the scenes that are taking
But
place.
you have moved a container, or what's called a sea can, which is one of those shipping containers that we all see.
Yeah, we did. We moved, it was only 130 barrels of solid bitumen to an Asian market just for testing for now, just to proof of concept that we could do it.
And it worked.
And it worked.
And there's a market for it.
There's a market for it.
And is it economically viable?
Yes.
Wow.
So we, one of the things we try to do is we do collaborate quite a bit with industry to make sure our numbers are on par. We believe Alberta bitumen is the best in the world. It's got the best quality. The whole industry itself is, I believe, is world class.
Not everybody agrees with you. You know that.
I know that, and I've been able to work in the industry. I'll tell you, I've traveled to many places around this world in that particular sector, and Canada is light years ahead in terms of environmental protection, reducing emissions, and transportation safety.
I wish I had you with me in Toronto last year when I had an opportunity to interview Michael Bloomberg of Bloomberg Press, the guy who wants to be the president of the United States. And one of the things that he said was about Canada, well, we got to get you off that dirty oil. That's that's his perception. What would you have said to that?
I would tell him he's actually incorrect. We have, I know the Alberta oil sands and Canada in general, in terms of its ability to move oil in a safe and effective manner to reduce their emissions. They've all been working at that over the last 5 to 10 years on reducing emissions, and we have a better track record than any other country. Mm-hmm. The only problem, though, is Uncle Sam is our only buyer. And so when you only have one buyer, you are armed. You're basically you got no competitor. Mm-hmm. So the buyer could really negotiate down next to nothing. So the country as a whole is losing billions of dollars.
Which we know to be true.
Yeah, that could come back into the economy, right?
Yes.
So look, I'm a big believer in pipelines still. It's a huge requirement. Big crude energy is a small part of the equation in hopes to be able to be that a piece that solves this ever-growing problem we have where we can't get our product to new market. If we could free up some capacity space via pipeline, then hey, I'm all for that. But I still believe that pipelines need to get built. Mm-hmm. I still believe that our oil needs to get to new markets. I look, 5 years ago, if we were having this conversation, you probably would have got a different response because actually even longer than that, until I actually went there, I actually went to a community, and I really encourage everybody that's on the coast, go visit Fort Mackay, Fort McMurray.
Yeah.
Look, they're going to tell you it wasn't always sunshines and rainbows up there when they started. But when I listen to communities like Metlakatla and what they're doing around accumulative effects and data collection, it was the same conversation I had with the group up in Alberta, and a lot of the good work that they're doing. But industry, look, they've come a long way. I'm not saying they were perfect, and they're far from it. But I'll tell you, it's been a night and day to be more inclusive and collaborative with First Nations. I mean, Synovus just announced a $50 million housing initiative. $10 million a year they're going to pump back into the communities of Métis and First Nation for housing, the housing crisis. There's a lot of really good things. Suncor, they spent, I don't know, I think it was $5 billion in procurement opportunities for Indigenous communities.
Right.
There are more Indigenous contractors in today's economy in the resource sector than there is anywhere else in this country. So you can't tell me things aren't working. They're working.
I've been there. I've been to like on site in some of those projects, and what I thought I knew was not what I experienced. And I wasn't there on a tour. I was there for other reasons, and so there was no reason to show me anything. I just happened to witness it while I was there.
Yeah. You know, like I said, they're taking advice. I'm really honored that I'm in the position that I'm in.
Yeah.
Being able to meet with government, being able to meet with industry, being able to meet with a variety of First Nations and really hear their stories. And if I could help bridge the gap around relationship building, I'm all in. I'm very passionate about this. I believe that those that are in the resource sector really want to bring along the communities that don't otherwise wouldn't have had that opportunity. And I think that's the way the country's headed, to really be inclusive of those communities that never had an opportunity. Like, for example, like us, Lakolamsa, Malakala, as you know, we were the epicenter along with Haisa in terms of oil and gas development. But we also have to remember there are communities that are way off the corridor that don't have those opportunities.
They have no opportunities. Yeah. And so there has to be a path to shared prosperity.
Yes.
Because to exclude anybody, when we were at the Shared Prosperity event, I spoke a little bit there, and I quoted Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, where he talks about the fact that he finds it so remarkable that we can have islands of poverty in a vast ocean of material prosperity.
Yes.
How's that possible? The only way that we do that is because it was a man-made construct.
Yes.
It's time for us to tear that down. Well, and I think we're moving in that direction. Yes. We still have a long way to go. So for anybody who says, "Oh well, get over it," and this way, we're not even close.
No,
you and I are having this wonderful conversation. We're going, "Yeah, let's go," and you're making things happen. But there's still so much work that needs to be done.
There is, and I'm meeting a lot of wonderful people in industry. And of course, I know a lot of wonderful people in the indigenous communities. Some of them are very close friends of mine. And I want to give both sides the opportunity. I want to be able to be a part of providing a communication corridor that if we could just sit down across from one another, you're going to find that there's a lot of common ground. And we haven't been able to get there yet. And we're moving in the right direction. And
we need to keep having those conversations. But we also need to make real opportunities that are going to have a real impact, not just a theoretical impact on the lives of individuals, right down to the street corner, down whatever street in, Haisla community of Kitimat. It's like, okay, like we want that young girl and that young boy to grow up knowing that they can do anything they want in this world.
Absolutely. It's no different. The message is no different when I tell my son and my two girls that they can do anything you want, and the only limitation is yourself. I was telling a story to a friend. I'll be very candid. It was a very tough upbringing for me in the community. We didn't have a lot of means in terms of money. Of course, you need money to live. We were able to survive on our seafood, but there was a lot of dysfunction. And unfortunately, I grew up around a family that was really engaged with alcohol, substance abuse, and I've seen a lot of things that probably a child should never see.
Right.
And I remember I was so active in basketball. I played a lot of basketball.
Yes.
And I remember.
Did you ever play against Ellis Ross? Or you?
I did.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we had. You got to ask him about his speech actually in the legislature a few months ago. I won't make a comment to it, but he'll get a kick out of that.
Yeah.
So. But you got to ask him about the speech I actually gave him to read out. But
basketball played a big role in your life, didn't it?
It did. It would save my life. But I was getting back to what I said. I remember my parents were trying the best they can, but like I said, alcohol was a big consumer in our household. And I remember being super hungry, and I saw a crumb of old bread between the fridge and the stove, and I took that out between that, and I put mustard on it, and that was my lunch.
Wow.
And so then I had basketball practice that night.
And that's it? That's the total amount of calories you
Yeah, I was starving.
Wow.
And then I went and played, but thank God I had some good friends and people that were there growing up. There's so many people I can't wait to thank one day. I know where I'm headed. I know where Blackfish is headed. I know where I'm headed in my family. I want to do the best I can for my family, so they'll never have to go through that.
So you had that community that helped you. You are part of the community that's helping others.
Yeah, it was one of those things.
It really does take a village, doesn't it?
It does. For some reason, nature took its course, and it was nurture versus nature.
Yeah.
And I was really blessed to be surrounded by some really good people in Lockville Lambs that really watched over me, and they took pride in that, and it gave me pride. And then, but all the things that we experienced as youth, so many of us never talked about it.
Right.
Growing up, and so when we're going through all those challenges and obstacles we were facing as youth, you never really think about the impacts it will be when you get older if you don't deal with them.
Yep.
And I've learned the hard way. I really harbored a lot of stuff, and I never talked about what was going on, and I just continued to focus on my ability to play the sport. But what ended up happening, because of my inability to not talk about it, because I felt so ashamed about my circumstances, that the trauma got so great that it took over my ability my love for the sport of basketball. It took over my love for doing so many things in my life, like keeping active, and because I just had this big weight on me. And so we're just, and I'm not alone. There's a lot of people out there that have amazing stories, trials and tribulations that have overcome amazing obstacles. I'm thankful for what I was given with what I've been able to work with to get to me where I'm at. I'm not there yet 100%, and I want to be able to give more. And what I want to do with the opportunity to make money is to give back.
Yes.
And I want to give back to those kids that are out there. And I talk to my business partners about this a lot, about dedicating a certain percentage of what we will make in the future back to the social cause, because there's a lot of kids out there, people, adults, they could use a leg up, whether it's steel-toe boots, a hard hat, a tuition payment, all those little things.
License.
Yeah, a driver's license is one of the number one causes for why Indigenous people are unable to find work.
Because they can't get to the job.
Yeah, and not in that, it's a health and safety issue. I mean, if they got to rush to the hospital, and some of these communities are in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So all those things I want to be able to give back, and I want to be able to start telling my story, because I think people got Chris Sankey wrong.
Well, the great thing for me is I'm sitting here across the table from you, and I'm going, okay, you are a manifestation of willpower to get beyond the circumstances that you were born into and were presented with. So you are a mentor, but you're also actively, directly involved in other people's lives. And the more you keep moving forward, I think that you're going to continue to provide benefits, not just to like your local community and your family, but to society as a whole. And I'm really thankful that you came in and had this conversation with me. And I hope we have more in the future.
I love that. It would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.